What you see is peace, you see harmony, you see tranquility, and it's the most peaceful, quiet, gentle thing that you ever get to experience. You can never know the inner life of another, but we can start to piece together a picture and an understanding. And it's that idea of beginner's mind, that curiosity, you know, the curious equestrians.
Have much more compassion and empathy within the horse world, giving the horses more choices, but in a way that doesn't necessarily have to align with our needs, but also listening to things they want to do and also recognizing when they want us to be a part of that work.
Emily, take us back. Where did your love of horses begin?
That's a really good question. I guess I've been around horses almost full time since I was 10. And that would be my mother's doing.
Usually,
There was always something about horses. I was, believe it or not, very introverted and very shy as a kid. And so there was something about the quietness of being around horses, that non-pressured quiet of being allowed to just sort of navigate that space. But I think, like everybody else, that took its own path because there was ways you're supposed to be with horses. Yeah. And so that got managed for me. And then my mother she got her own horse. She got more into horses and wanted a buddy to go riding with. So she got a horse, started getting into fox hunting, brought me with her. I didn't ride in an arena until I was in my 20s. It was all just
gung ho.
Oh yeah, you learn how to just stay on and you go. So I didn't take any formal lessons until much later. So I wasn't part of pony club. I wasn't part of the traditional childhood equitation side. But at the same time, I didn't have any friends. I didn't have any peers who were doing this. So, you're bringing up really good memories for me. When I was about 14, I got introduced to a horse named Bozzy. He was actually a Irish cob that had been brought over from Ireland. And while everybody else had their after-school activities, I would go and just play with him. And so he taught me how to ride. It was him, because I didn't have any lessons. I was just stay on. So I figured it out. I can't tell you how many times I fell off. And in hindsight, oh my God, that horse was a saint. But yeah, I would go off. My dream was to go on, fantasy adventures in the forest with my pony partner. Yes. And so we did. And I would just, you would get on and we just go running around the fields and through the forests. And of course, this is before people paid attention to their children and what their children were doing. So it's okay, you go off to your thing. So that was my life. That was before I had any really good friends. That was before I, understood what having good human friendships could be like. And, so life happens, go off to university, some other things. But when I came back, I was in the Peace Corps. I ran off to Africa. After university, when I came back to the States, my undergraduate degree wasn't going to get me any jobs. But so I fell back into to horses and became a full-time trainer and instructor. And Bozzy was still alive, and so he eventually came to live with me. But it was that process. That's when I started really honing in on I need to learn what traditional people talk about. And I had heard some of it growing up from all the adults in my world. I'm you can't let them do that, or you have to do this, or whatever.
You have to win.
Yes.
You have to leave it on a good note.
Yeah. So you have to walk into that pasture and be the lead horse or the dominant, blah, blah, blah. And so I had heard all of that to begin with. It never sat well, but I figured, okay, these people know more than I do. I should listen to that. And so when horses became more of a full-time thing for me, I needed to take lessons from different people to continue to improve myself while I taught other people. Yeah, I heard more of that, even more of that. But that's when it started to contradict each other in terms of this instructor saying this thing, this instructor saying something else. Then I'm asking the question over here and they're saying something totally different. and here's this clinician, and here's this clinician, and again, no clear answers.
And you've done some fascinating research into horse behaviour. Tell us a bit about how horses build social relationships and bonds within a herd.
Oh, well, that's the big question. That's the question we're getting at. And there's no simple answer to that, much like it's, how do you build a friendship? Tell me in 5 words how you build a friendship. Tell me how that's done. There is just, watching what choices they make voluntarily with each other when they want to be in each other's company. That's where it starts. It's looking at, okay, when horses are given a choice, and they're given a choice, a really good choice of potential friends, potential, bonding opportunities, some horses don't. They're just loners. It's not for them.
Much like humans.
Yeah. That happens occasionally. But a lot of horses do seek out, and they have favorites. The word friendship typically isn't allowed to be discussed for animals. It's favorite conspecific. But as we recognize that animals have these rich emotional lives, we can start to talk about, they have friendships, and you know what? They do build, and they build very much like our friendships build. They'll figure out whether or not they want to be in each other's space. And then maybe they do, maybe they don't. And if they don't, there are clear indicators that they'll tell each other to not be in my space, or that I won't be in your space. But maybe they decide they kind of like one another, and they'll check each other out. Sometimes if they're both curious, they'll come and sniff, and maybe there's some squealing and whatnot. It's that general like, hey, I'm nice to meet you, I'm so-and-so. And then they'll figure it out after that. But it's a slow process of kind of coming together, going apart, coming together, going apart. And eventually there's more togetherness than apartness. And they can still go off and have little lives and come back to one another. But they're willing to share that space. And we talk about that space, you're thinking like, oh, is that a quarter-mile space? Is it right on top of one another? We start figuring this out by, okay, here's 2 horses we talk time and proximity, spending time close enough to one another where they could bite or kick each other, but they're not. Okay, and they're continuing to share the space because horses don't stand still; they move all the time. So while this one moves, this one is continuing to share that space, or while this one moves, this one. So they're choosing to stay near each other during this whole time. Okay, so they're choosing to be in each other's space in a prolonged sense when they have other options, but they're choosing. Okay, so what behaviors are going on in there? Ethograms that are out there talk about play behavior, agonistic behavior, stress behavior. But what we're looking for are the other nuances that take place, and they're small and they're tiny. But the main one is time and proximity, because not all horses touch each other. Not all horses do big behaviors. Not all horses allogroom. They don't always mutually groom one another either. So it's about what other things are going on in that space. Time and proximity is the huge one. And then other little things. But it's really about creating communication within there. What does this one like versus what this one likes? Because sometimes what this one wants to do to express something within that space may not be the same as this one, but it's part of their conversation. So very individualized, but still within that same space.
The wild ponies that are behind us somewhere.
Over there, yeah.
They have been gifted points in the
Yes.
wilderness. They can go wherever they want to behind it and
Yes.
explore all the different crevices of the landscape.
Yes.
How do we bring choice into the domesticated horse's life and give them more of it?
Well, and I think part of that conversation is recognizing where they don't have choice. Like realizing where we've taken choice away, whether it's within the facility itself or within our handling. So looking at it from their perspective, where are their choices being, like, where do they have choice, where do they not have choice? And sometimes they don't have choice, and we have to be honest with them. there's legal ramifications regarding how we handle our horses in terms of they have to be vaccinated, they have to have, a certain type of medical care, or, they're not allowed to run wild in the street. They have to be, so they're not given as many choices as these guys are. And even these guys have a fence. But where can we make that? We can create opportunities for more communication, for us to realize, acknowledge, and support when they say no, when they don't want to do something. And having that as part of the conversation. We can also start to create language with our horses. And not just, I'm going to give you a treat for doing this, or I'm going to, tap you on the hind end to get you to go forward. Like, that's kind of a one-sided conversation. We want to create more actual communication and language. And that requires give and take. I'd like to do this. Would you like to do this with me? And if the horse says no, that's okay. They've at least communicated that they don't want to be a part of that. Great, communication. You have a communication there. Awesome. And that's part of choice, is being able to choose when and how they want to do certain things, and being able to be allowed a voice in that, and us honoring that voice.
And there are two different types of herds behind it. There's a family herd with stallions and they can breed naturally. And there's a herd with stallions that have been vasectomized.
Yes.
Why have they gone through the vasectomy rather than being castrated and made into gelding?
Well, this is a better conversation for Carol, who manages this herd.
Yes. Do you have an answer to
I
that?
do have an answer, but I'm having this conversation with her. But yes, that's a Carol question. Because that way they're still behaviorally expressive as stallion, and they actually having that level of testosterone gives them certain drive to behave in certain ways, which helps keep their muscle tone up. It keeps them behaviorally expressive within an otherwise very behaviorally expressive environment. So nothing's changed for them other than they can't reproduce. So it helps maintain a lot of wellness and well-being for them behaviorally, socially, and physically.
We're going to learn from the herd behind us as we get closer.
I have no idea.
What do you think we'll see at this time of day?
I don't know. It changes every single time I'm here, and it's great. What we're going to see. So this is the breeding herd, and you'll notice, they have all this and way over there to go on, but they're all together. We have multiple family groups here. And so people think about horses and they think, again, that dominance hierarchy thing, and they're all going to fight together. You go out there, you can't even tell who's the stallion and who's the mare. And there's multiple stallions, multiple family groups, all in that same grouping, because they get along. This whole concept of, one leader, one dominant, whatever, much more collaborative and much more cohesive. Anything that goes along fighting-wise, which is actually rare, usually play or just, communicating, spatial needs. And it's not like they run far. Most of the time, they're just like, oh, we got in my space. Okay, let's get this done. But really, they coexist in this beautiful space together where, they're figuring it out. They play. The stallions will play together, and, they'll wander off with their friend over here and play and come back. And the mares are, they mingle. I can't tell where the family groups start and end in this.
Wow.
It's great. It's a wonderful space. Because if they didn't like each other, there's plenty of resources out here for them to go and be somewhere else. There are a couple of geldings that stay on the periphery. They aren't a part of this group, but they stay on the periphery because of their own choices. That's where they feel comfortable. Great. They have that choice.
And Emily, your research is unique because so often it's the domesticated horse that is researched and studied.
Yeah. And that, when we look at horse behavior and the research that comes out of the domestic environment with horse behavior, we have to recognize there's so many variables that are part of that environment that are not accounted for. So the only way to truly understand horse behavior as we understand it in the domestic environment, if we're looking at this from a scientific perspective, we have to take away those variables. So we're looking for that control. All right, so we're looking for how horses choose to live their lives when they have all of those choices, when they have the social choices, when they have the environment choices, all of those, and then what's going on in that space. There aren't that many places where we can do that kind of research. here is one of them, and this is amazing. The horses here have been allowed to freely choose their social, reproductive, everything for years. And so we have family groups and this dynamic movement and social interactions, and it's great. But we also can't just stay here and do that, because that's just here. We have to look at how that plays out in different environments with different herds and where that baseline is. And from there, we can look at, all right, so how does this play a role in the non-breeding herd here where it's bisectomized? Because that's a variable that we have to account for in any changes. And then eventually look at all of the different ways this may or may not play out and the ways that our domestic environment influences those behaviors. And that's what we have to keep into consideration. Most of what we think of as normal horse behavior in our domestic world is not an adaptation of other behaviors. And most of the time, that adaptation is misunderstood.
And for you, on this research journey, coming from a traditional equestrian background, how isolating has it been for you to step out and look into a new way of thinking?
Yeah, for years I felt very alone. It was like I saw this thing and I was learning these things and I couldn't find anybody to have this conversation with. So it was very isolating. But sometimes you need to continue with that path. It meant more for me and aligned more with my values and morals to continue on that exploration than to continue along with the traditional equine stuff. So I reformatted how I interacted with horses. You know, like many others, I grew up saying, oh, you need to go catch your horse. Okay. So you might spend a half an hour chasing your horse around the field to catch it. Nobody ever said, why is the horse running away? Why is the horse difficult to catch? Why doesn't the horse want me to catch this? So I started asking that question. And I literally, once that hit me, like it hit me, and I didn't go in the pasture for a month. I stood outside at the fence thinking, how do I fit into their lives? What is it about me that they don't want to be with? Like, what have I done? What interactions, what history are we shared that they don't want to be a part of? And so I had to rearrange the types of interactions that I wanted to have with the horses and try and see it from their perspective to take this new approach on what kinds of things we could do together and what I could do, not with treats, but what I could do to figure out what they wanted to be a part of. You know, so figuring out how to have those conversations with them regarding what types of routines can we go through to create interactions that the next time I go out with them, they want to be a part of that. So I started asking my horses questions, not verbally, but it was, all right, if I'm going to bring out this halter, it means this. If I'm going to bring out this halter, it's going to mean this. So this halter is associated with let's go and just groom. This one is let's go and let's knock things down in the arena, because it became a game thing. Like build obstacles, not to go over them in any kind of order, but just go and knock them down. Yeah, totally. Whatever way they wanted to do it. And this one is for riding. And so they could start to associate those with different activities, and then they could choose. Or they could literally choose to walk away, and that was okay too. All of it was accepted. I'm just offering options. Later on, you know, you get to the point where the horse starts to offer options. And that's where it gets really.
And with your unique and groundbreaking research, where do you hope it will go in the next few years, and what impact do you hope it will have in the next few decades as we move forward?
I think my ultimate goal is for people and horses to have a better relationship with one another. For the horses to be acknowledged as individual beings within that space, because they play just as much of a role in that relationship as we do, and we need to see it from their perspective and know what that means. So to have much more compassion and empathy within the horse world, giving the horses more choices, but in a way that doesn't necessarily have to align with our needs, but also listening to things they want to do, and also recognizing when they want us to be a part of that world. Because that's amazing and can open up a lot. My utopia. What I hope is that things just continue to get better, and that we continue to have these conversations, and that we work towards a better, more mutual relationship with our horses or our donkeys or whatever equids we might have. Yeah. And in the world of equine assisted work, I hope that feeds in, that understanding of horse-human relationship feeds into a healthier approach to the interactions that take place that can be mutually beneficial for both the horse and human.